The challenge begins. The grand hall of the Selleri War Council was filled with deep, rumbling laughter. Rows of towering warriors, their armored bodies gleaming under the red glow of the chamber, looked down at the lone human standing before them. Some smirked, others scoffed, but none of them took him seriously. Commander Ryan Carter stood firm, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. He was used to this reaction. Humanity was new to the galactic scene, and the Selleri, one of the most powerful warrior races, saw them as weak. Nothing more than fragile creatures trying to act strong. Sitting at the head of the War Council was General Sira, the most feared warrior of the Selleri Empire. She leaned forward, her sharp black armor shifting as she rested her chin on her clawed hand. Her golden eyes burned with amusement. "A human," she said, her voice laced with mockery. "Your leaders send you to fight us. This is a joke." The laughter grew louder. Ryan didn't flinch. He had faced worse. "I didn't come here for jokes," he replied, his voice steady. "I came to prove humanity's strength." Sira chuckled, rising from her seat. She was tall, easily 7 feet, her presence commanding. Her movements were graceful, but there was power in every step. She walked toward Ryan and stopped just a few feet away. "Prove it," she repeated. "Very well. We settle things in the arena. If you win, we recognize humans as warriors. If you lose," she leaned in slightly, her smirk widening, "you crawl back to Earth and tell them they are nothing." Ryan met her gaze. "I accept." The crowd roared in excitement. A challenge had been made. The arena was unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. The ground was a smooth, polished stone, glowing faintly with energy. High walls surrounded the battlefield, filled with thousands of Selleri spectators. They were eager to see their greatest warrior crush the foolish human. Ryan stood on one side of the arena, stretching his arms. He had trained for this moment. His muscles were ready, his mind sharp. The Selleri were stronger, faster, and had better technology. But Ryan had something they didn't: strategy. On the other side, Sira stepped into the ring. She removed her heavy armor, leaving only her combat suit, light but reinforced. She flexed her claws, rolling her shoulders. "You can still walk away," she offered. "No one will think less of you." Ryan smirked. "I think I'll stay." The horn sounded. Sira moved. It was instant. 1 second she was standing still, the next she was a blur. She closed the distance between them in a heartbeat, her clawed hand slicing through the air, aiming for Ryan's throat. The crowd gasped. But Ryan wasn't there anymore. He ducked, twisting his body just in time to avoid the strike. The wind from her attack rushed past his ear, but he remained unharmed. Sira's eyes widened slightly. He had dodged. She turned sharply, aiming a second strike at his ribs. Ryan barely managed to block, bracing his arm against the impact. It felt like getting hit by a sledgehammer. Pain shot through his body, but he didn't go down. Instead, he countered. Before Sira could react, Ryan stepped in close and landed a solid punch to her stomach. It wasn't enough to hurt her, but it was enough to make her take a step back. The crowd went silent. No one had expected him to last more than a few seconds, let alone land a hit. Sira tilted her head, her amusement replaced with curiosity. She flexed her fingers, adjusting her stance. "Interesting," she murmured. "Let's see how long you last." She came at him again, faster this time. Ryan had fought fast opponents before, but Sira was something else. She was like a shadow, moving with impossible speed. He barely dodged her first few attacks, each one coming closer than the last. Then she feinted. Ryan moved to block her right arm, only to realize too late that it was a trick. Her left elbow slammed into his chest, knocking the wind out of him. Before he could recover, she grabbed his arm and twisted, throwing him across the arena. Ryan hit the ground hard, rolling to lessen the impact. His ribs ached, his breath came short, but he got back up. The crowd cheered, not for him, but for the fight. Syrah smirked. You're tougher than you look. Ryan wiped blood from his lip. And you talk too much. She laughed, shaking her head. You're going to regret this. Ryan steadied himself. His arms burned, his legs ached, but he was still in the fight. He had seen her patterns now. The way she moved, the way she attacked. He just needed an opening. Syrah rushed forward again, aiming for a finishing blow. The crowd held its breath. At the last second, Ryan moved. Not back. Forward. He ducked under her attack and caught her wrist mid-swing. The arena went completely silent. Syrah's eyes widened in shock. No one had ever caught her attack before. Ryan tightened his grip, twisted her arm, and pushed her back. Syrah stumbled. For the first time, she looked at Ryan with something new in her gaze. Not amusement. Not arrogance. Respect. The fight had just begun. The first strike. The silence in the arena was unnatural. Thousands of celery warriors watched in stunned disbelief. No one had expected the human to last this long, let alone catch General Syrah's attack mid-swing. The very idea of a human matching Celery in combat was laughable, until now. Ryan Carter held his ground, his grip firm around Syrah's wrist. For the first time, there was no amusement in her golden eyes, only calculation. He had surprised her, something no warrior had done in years. Then, just as quickly as it happened, she twisted free. Syrah took a step back, flexing her fingers, her smirk returning. You're better than I thought. Ryan didn't respond. Words were useless now. He rolled his shoulders, shaking off the pain in his ribs. Syrah's attacks were fast and brutal, but he had seen something important. A slight hesitation in her follow-through. A weakness. The crowd began chanting Syrah's name. They wanted to see her finish this fight, to crush the human and prove that the Celery were superior. But Syrah didn't move. For the first time, she was analyzing him. She had fought countless warriors, defeated some of the strongest beings in the galaxy. And yet this human, this fragile creature, had not only survived but forced her to adjust her strategy. It made her blood rush with excitement. Let's see what else you can do, she whispered. Then she attacked. Faster than before. Ryan barely saw it. One moment she was standing still, the next she was upon him, a blur of motion. He threw himself backward just in time as her claws sliced through the air inches from his chest. She pressed the attack. Left hook. Right elbow. Spinning kick. Ryan dodged, ducked, blocked, but just barely. He was fast, but she was faster. The force of her strikes sent shockwaves through his arms, numbing his muscles. He knew he couldn't keep dodging forever. Sooner or later, she would land a clean hit, and that would be the end of him. He had to counterattack. Syrah launched a devastating overhead strike, expecting him to dodge. But this time, Ryan stepped in. Instead of moving back, he moved forward. Using her momentum against her, he caught her forearm mid-swing, twisted his body, and drove his knee into her ribs. The impact was solid. For the first time, Syrah staggered. A collective gasp rippled through the arena. No one had ever made her stumble. Ryan didn't waste the moment. He followed up with a brutal elbow strike to her jaw, then spun into a sweeping kick, trying to knock her off her feet. Syrah barely managed to block. She leaped back, landing gracefully, but there was a new look in her eyes. Not anger, not frustration. Something else. Impressive, she admitted, wiping a drop of blood from her lip. Ryan exhaled sharply. His entire body ached, his lungs burned, but he wasn't done yet. Syrah flexed her fingers, shaking out the sting from his strike. I see now. You're not strong because of brute force. She tilted her head. You're strong because you're smart. Ryan smirked. You're just figuring that out. She chuckled, pacing in a slow circle around him. You've studied me, haven't you? You're watching my movements, learning my patterns. Ryan said nothing. Syrah's golden eyes gleamed. Good. Then she exploded forward again. This time, there was no hesitation. Her attacks were fluid, unpredictable, relentless. She didn't follow the same rhythm. She adapted. She came at Ryan from different angles, changing speeds, switching styles. Ryan barely managed to keep up. Every block sent pain through his arms. Every dodge took more effort. His muscles were slowing, his reaction time dipping. Then she faked an opening. Ryan saw his chance, a gap in her defense. He lunged in for a strike, and it was a trap. Sira sidestepped at the last second, grabbed his wrist, and twisted with inhuman strength. Ryan's balance shattered. He felt the air shift around him. Then he was airborne. Sira flipped him over her shoulder, slamming him into the ground with enough force to crack the stone beneath him. The entire arena shook. The accelerating warriors cheered wildly as Ryan lay on the ground, gasping for air. Sira loomed over him, her expression unreadable. "You're good," she admitted, "but you're not accelerating." She raised her foot, ready to end the fight. Ryan's vision blurred. His body screamed in pain. He had to get up, had to move, had to. Then something clicked. With sheer willpower, Ryan rolled away at the last second. Sira's foot crashed down where his head had been a moment before. Using the momentum, he pushed himself back up to his feet. His legs trembled, his chest heaved, but he was still standing. The accelerary fell silent again. They had seen warriors go down before. They had never seen a human get back up. Sira watched him carefully. Then, for the first time, she did something no one expected. She nodded. A silent acknowledgement. But the fight was not over. Ryan steadied himself, raising his fists. Sira exhaled, rolling her shoulders. "All right, human." Her lips curled into a grin. "Let's see how much you can really take." She lunged at him once more. A warrior's pride. The air in the arena was thick with tension. Thousands of Celery warriors leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked on the battlefield below. They had expected a short fight, a one-sided display of dominance. Instead, they were witnessing something unthinkable. A human, a species they considered weak, was still standing. Ryan Carter's body screamed in pain. His muscles burned, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he refused to fall. The weight of Sira's last blow still lingered in his ribs, but he pushed past it. On the other side of the arena, General Sira paced slowly, her golden eyes studying him with newfound interest. There was no longer mockery in her expression. She had underestimated him once. She would not make that mistake again. "You should be on the ground," she said, tilting her head. "Your bones should be broken." Ryan wiped blood from his lip. "Guess your people aren't as strong as they think." A dangerous silence followed. Then, Sira laughed. It wasn't the amused, condescending laughter from before. This was different. A warrior's laughter. "I see now," she murmured. "You're not just strong. You're stubborn." Ryan smirked. "That's what keeps us alive." Sira's grin widened. "Good. Let's test that." She vanished. 1 second she was standing still. The next, she was right in front of him. Ryan had been expecting an attack. He had braced himself, watching her every movement, waiting for a chance to react. But she was faster than before. Faster than he thought possible. Her knee slammed into his stomach, knocking the air from his lungs. Ryan staggered, but Sira didn't stop. She twisted behind him, a flash of dark armor and golden eyes, then drove her elbow into his back. Ryan crashed into the stone floor. The impact sent cracks spiderwebbing across the arena. A loud gasp ran through the accelerary crowd. Even they hadn't expected such a brutal display of force. Sira stood over him, breathing steadily. "Stay down, human," she warned. "Your body isn't built for this. You've lasted longer than I expected, but this fight is over." Ryan gritted his teeth. Pain pulsed through his entire body, screaming at him to stop. But he didn't. He pressed his palms against the stone, and pushed himself up, inch by inch. Syra's eyes narrowed. You can't win. Ryan's breathing was labored, but his eyes held no fear. Maybe not, he admitted, but neither can you. For the first time in her life, Syra hesitated. Something about Ryan's unbreakable will unsettled her. Every warrior had limits. There was a point where instinct told them to surrender, where survival became more important than victory. But Ryan was ignoring that instinct. He fought as if there was no limit, as if losing was simply not an option. And Syra felt something strange. Respect. The moment passed quickly. Syra took a deep breath, resetting her stance. Fine, she said. Let's end this. Ryan didn't argue. He knew she was stronger, faster, and more experienced. He couldn't overpower her, but he could outthink her, and he had been watching her closely. Syra lunged forward, claws flashing. Ryan moved. Not backward. Forward. His sudden shift caught Syra off guard. Instead of dodging, he stepped into her attack. At the last moment, he dropped low, letting her strike pass just over his head. Then, with everything he had left, he struck. A brutal uppercut to her ribs. The impact was solid. Syra stumbled back. The crowd fell silent again. Ryan pressed the attack. He didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. He followed up with a spinning kick, aiming for her side. Syra blocked, but barely. The force of the kick pushed her back another step. Another hit. Another shock to the audience. Syra's breathing was heavier now. Her muscles burned with exertion. This was no longer a fight between superior strength and inferior weakness. This was a battle between equals. She smiled. Ryan had no time to react before she launched her next attack. Her movements were even faster now, more precise. Ryan blocked the first few strikes, but one slipped past his guard. A powerful kick that sent him skidding across the stone. But instead of falling, he caught himself. He was tired. He was injured, but he was still fighting. Syra exhaled, rolling her shoulders. This human would not stop. And for the first time in the fight, she was enjoying herself. This wasn't a slaughter. This wasn't humiliation. This was warrior against warrior, and Syra would treat it as such. She raised her fists, golden eyes gleaming. Ryan clenched his fists, heart pounding. The real fight had just begun. The warrior's decision. The arena felt different now. At the start, the Cellary warriors had mocked the human, laughing at the very idea that a fragile creature could stand against General Syra. But now they watched in silence, their golden eyes fixed on the battle. Something had changed. Syra stood at one end of the arena, breathing hard, her muscles aching from the relentless exchange. For the first time in years, she had been forced to fight seriously. And Ryan Carter, he was still standing. Bruised, battered, and barely holding himself together, but standing. Syra tilted her head, studying the man in front of her. He was human, but he fought like something more. He had no claws, no enhanced strength, no genetic modifications, and yet he had matched her, blow for blow, strike for strike. Not because of brute force, not because of speed, because of sheer willpower. The crowd was no longer cheering for Syra. They weren't cheering for Ryan, either. They were simply watching, entranced. Syra exhaled slowly, flexing her fingers. Her body was sore, but the battle had awakened something in her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. She took a step forward. I was wrong about you, she admitted. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow. Glad you finally noticed. Syra smirked. But don't celebrate just yet. She rushed forward. Ryan was ready. The fight resumed. This time, there was no arrogance, no hesitation, no playing around. They fought as equals. Ryan dodged, countered, struck with precision. He adapted to every move Syra threw at him, forcing her to keep changing her approach. Syra, for her part, fought like she was facing an opponent worthy of respect. No longer holding back, no longer testing him. She fought to win. Blow after blow, strike after strike, until they both stopped. The two warriors stood in the center of the arena, their bodies covered in sweat, their chests rising and falling with heavy breaths. Neither had landed the final blow. Neither had fallen. For the first time in sci-fi history, a battle had ended in a draw. The crowd was speechless. Then they roared. Not in anger, not in disappointment, in respect. The XLR only valued one thing: strength. And today, Ryan Carter had proven himself. The aftermath. Ryan sat on the stone bench in the warriors' quarters, pressing an ice pack against his ribs. Every inch of his body hurt. Syrah stood near the entrance, arms crossed. "You should be resting." Ryan winced as he shifted. "I thought that's what I was doing." She chuckled. "You did well, human. Better than anyone expected." Ryan looked at her. "Even you." Syrah hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, even me." Ryan exhaled. "So what happens now?" Syrah studied him for a moment before answering. "The Emperor has made a decision," she said. "You will be given the chance to prove yourself further." Ryan frowned. Wasn't nearly dying in the arena proof enough? Syrah smirked. "Not quite. You earned respect today. But respect is not the same as acceptance. If humanity truly wishes to be seen as equals, you must face one final test." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Syrah's golden eyes gleamed. "The grand tournament." Ryan sighed. "Of course. Another fight." Syrah nodded. "Not just any fight. The grand tournament is held every 10 cycles. The best warriors in the Empire battle for honor. If you enter and win, Earth will be recognized as a warrior race. No one will question your strength again." Ryan leaned back against the bench, processing the information. He had fought for survival before. He had fought for duty. But this was a challenge. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was rising to a challenge. After a moment, he looked at Syrah. "All right," he said. "I'll do it." Syrah's lips curled into a grin. "Then let's get to training." The Warlord's challenge. The grand tournament. Ryan Carter had been in his fair share of fights, but this was different. It wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about proving a point. This was warrior against warrior, strength against strength. And if he won, Earth would finally be seen as an equal. But the challenge ahead, it was bigger than anything he had ever faced. The Arena of Titans. The grand tournament was held in the Colosseum of the Fallen, a massive structure built atop the ruins of an ancient battlefield. It was said that only the strongest survived here. Ryan stood at the entrance, his eyes scanning the towering warriors around him. There were sci-fi champions, their armor gleaming under the blood-red sky. There were beasts from distant stars, their muscles rippling with unnatural power. And then, there was him, a lone human in a sea of titans. He could hear the whispers. The human won't last. He should have stayed on his fragile little world. Syrah should have crushed him when she had the chance. Ryan ignored them. He had nothing to prove to these people. He had already beaten the odds. Now he was here to win. The first battle. The tournament wasn't a simple one-on-one fight. It was war. The first round was a battlefield free-for-all. Hundreds of warriors dropped into the arena, weapons in hand, eyes burning with the desire to crush their opponents. Ryan had no claws, no energy blades, no genetic enhancements. All he had was his mind. The horn sounded, and the battle began. Ryan moved instantly, ducking low as a massive alien swung a hammer the size of a boulder at him. The impact cracked the ground where he had been standing just seconds before. He didn't wait. Using his smaller size to his advantage, he rolled forward, grabbing a fallen warrior's spear. A beast 3 times his size charged at him. Ryan didn't hesitate. He sidestepped, using the spear's momentum to trip the creature. The alien collapsed face first into the dirt, and Ryan used the moment to slam the back of the spear against its head. Knocked out cold. 1 down. 99 to go. Syrah watches from above. High above the arena, General Syrah sat in the royal viewing box, arms crossed. She watched as warriors tore into each other, dust and blood filling the air. Her golden eyes locked onto Ryan, who was moving through the battlefield with ruthless efficiency. No wasted energy, no wasted movement. Unlike the others, who relied on brute force, Ryan fought smart. He let the stronger warriors take each other out, only stepping in when necessary. Syrah's lips curled into a smirk. Clever, human. But then, her smirk faded. Because stepping into the battlefield was the warlord, and Ryan was directly in his path. The warlord appears. Ryan felt the ground tremble before he saw him. A massive, hulking figure towered above the battlefield, his armor blackened by the blood of countless victories. General Kavar, the undefeated champion of the tournament. The one warrior even Syrah had never dared to challenge, and he was coming straight for Ryan. Ryan tightened his grip on the spear. Well, this just got worse. Kavar didn't charge like the others. He simply walked forward, his presence alone forcing weaker warriors to retreat. He stared down at Ryan, amusement in his burning red eyes. A human. His voice was like grinding stone. This is an insult. Ryan didn't blink. Then you better not lose. The warriors around them went silent. Kavar let out a low chuckle. Bold. I like that. Then, without warning, he struck. Ryan barely had time to react before Kavar's fist slammed into the ground, sending a shockwave that nearly knocked him off his feet. He leaped back, gripping his spear. Kavar moved faster than something his size should be able to. A second punch came, aimed straight for Ryan's head. He ducked, just barely. The force of the strike sent dust and debris flying. Ryan knew he couldn't go head-to-head with this monster, so he did what he did best. He adapted. He used his speed, his agility, his brain. Kavar swung again. This time, Ryan rolled under his arm, spun around, and drove the spear into the warlord's side. The impact was solid, but it barely scratched him. Kavar turned his head slowly. His amusement had vanished. You dare. Ryan barely had time to react before Kavar grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. The crowd erupted in cheers. This was what they had been waiting for. Kavar tightened his grip, ready to end the fight. Ryan's vision blurred. He couldn't breathe. His muscles screamed for air. He had seconds to act. So, he did the unexpected. He dropped the spear. Kavar grinned, finally accepting defeat. Ryan shook his head. And then, he used both hands to grab Kavar's wrist. Using every last ounce of strength, he twisted and snapped the warlord's finger. Kavar roared in pain. His grip loosened, just enough. Ryan didn't waste the moment. He kicked off the warlord's chest, flipping backwards to the ground. Kavar stumbled. The crowd fell silent. Ryan was still alive. Kavar looked at his injured hand. Then he smiled. Not in anger. Not in humiliation. In respect. Interesting, he muttered. He cracked his knuckles. This just got fun. Ryan exhaled, bracing himself. The fight was far from over. The turning point. The Colosseum of the Fallen had never been so silent. Thousands of Selleri warriors, battle-hardened veterans, and galactic spectators watched in stunned disbelief. They had expected a quick, merciless execution. Instead, they had witnessed the impossible. Ryan Carter, the lone human in the tournament, had injured General Kavar, the undefeated warlord of the Selleri Empire. Not with brute force, not with alien technology, but with his mind. And now, the warlord was smiling. Not in arrogance, not in mockery, but in genuine excitement. For the first time in years, He had found a worthy opponent. The warlord's true strength. Ryan barely had time to recover. His lungs burned, his body screamed in pain, but Kavar wasn't giving him a second to breathe. The warlord lunged forward, faster than something his size should be able to move. Ryan dodged just in time as Kavar's fist slammed into the ground, shattering the stone beneath them. Dust and debris exploded into the air. Ryan didn't wait. He countered. He sprinted forward, sliding beneath Kavar's massive frame, slashing his spear across the warlord's exposed knee. The blade bit into flesh. Kavar grunted, staggering slightly, but he didn't fall. Instead, he grabbed Ryan by the leg mid-slide and hurled him across the arena. Ryan barely had time to react before he crashed into the stone wall, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. The crowd roared. The warlord cracked his neck. "You're fast, human," Kavar said, rolling his shoulders. "But speed alone won't save you." Ryan coughed, forcing himself to stand. His body ached, his ribs were likely cracked, but he couldn't stop now. Kavar watched him carefully. "This fight should be over," the warlord admitted. "Any other warrior would have fallen by now." Ryan wiped blood from his mouth. "Guess I'm not any other warrior." Kavar grinned. "No, you're not." Then he removed his armor. The entire arena gasped. Kavar's armor wasn't just protective, it was weighted, a symbol of his power. Removing it meant he was taking the fight seriously. Ryan's stomach tightened. This just got worse. The fight beyond limits. Kavar moved. Faster, stronger, more brutal. His first strike was a blur. Ryan barely managed to block, but the sheer force sent him skidding backward. Another blow. Another. Ryan dodged where he could, countered where he had to. But Kavar was adapting. Just like him. The warlord wasn't just a brute. He was a strategist. Ryan swung his spear. Kavar caught it mid-air and snapped it in half. Ryan tried to sidestep. Kavar predicted it and drove a fist into his stomach. Ryan collapsed to one knee, gasping for breath. Kavar loomed over him. "This is where you surrender," he said. "No shame in it." Ryan gritted his teeth. He couldn't win by matching Kavar's strength, but he could win another way. By using the warlord's own strength against him. Ryan slowly stood, forcing a smirk despite the pain. "You're strong, Kavar," he admitted, "but I've fought monsters before." Kavar chuckled. "And did you survive them?" Ryan's smirk widened. "I'm still here, aren't I?" Then he moved. Not backward. Forward. Kavar wasn't expecting it. Ryan ducked low, pivoting around the warlord's massive frame, and aimed straight for his old injury. His knee. Ryan slammed his fist into the weakened joint, sending a shock of pain through Kavar's body. The warlord stumbled. For the first time in his career, he was off balance. Ryan didn't stop. He drove his elbow into Kavar's ribs, twisting his body into the impact. Kavar grunted, his footing shaky. The crowd was on the edge of their seats. No one had ever pushed Kavar this far. Sira, watching from the stands, leaned forward. "Come on, human. Finish it." Ryan went for the final strike. Aimed for Kavar's throat. But the warlord moved. Faster than Ryan expected. He caught Ryan's arm mid-attack, twisting with brutal strength, and slammed him into the ground. The impact shook the entire Colosseum. Ryan lay on his back, vision spinning. His body refused to move. Kavar stood over him, breathing hard. The warlord had taken damage. He had felt this fight. And yet, he was still standing. Ryan wasn't. The horn sounded. The match was over. Kavar had won. But the crowd didn't cheer. Because this wasn't a loss. Ryan Carter had done something no one else had ever done. He had forced the undefeated warlord to fight at full power. He had survived. Kavar extended his hand. Ryan, exhausted, took it. The warlord helped him up. Then, Kavar raised Ryan's arm into the air. The crowd erupted, a roar of approval. Kavar turned to the emperor's balcony. "This human," he called out, his voice booming through the arena. "He is a warrior." The Cellary emperor stood, his piercing gaze sweeping over the Colosseum. Then he spoke. "The human race," the emperor declared, "is no longer weak." Cyrus' eyes widened. It was official. Earth was now recognized as a warrior race. Ryan had done it. He had won, not through brute force, not through genetic superiority, but through determination, intelligence, and sheer human resilience. And as Ryan stood among the strongest warriors in the galaxy, one thought filled his mind. Humanity just changed the game. The final battle, the declaration had been made. The Cellary emperor had spoken the words that changed everything. The human race is no longer weak. Ryan Carter had survived the grand tournament, stood against warriors who had trained for war their entire lives, and earned the respect of the undefeated warlord Kavar. For the first time in history, Earth was recognized as a warrior race. And yet, the real fight was only beginning. Because not everyone agreed with the emperor's decision. The rebellion rises. The grand tournament was meant to be the ultimate test, a way to determine strength through battle, not words. But some refused to accept the results. Deep in the underground chambers of the Colosseum, whispers of rebellion spread. Among them was Commander Vektal, a brutal Cellary warlord who had been one of the favorites to win the tournament, until Kavar eliminated him with a single blow. Vektal's pride had already been shattered, but the fact that the emperor had recognized a human as an equal, unacceptable. "This is an insult to our people," Vektal growled, his claws tightening into fists. The warriors around him, dozens of Cellary extremists, nodded in agreement. "The emperor has grown weak," another hissed. "Recognizing an inferior species. Disgusting." Vektal's eyes burned with fury. "The empire belongs to the strong," he snarled. "If the emperor will not protect our traditions, then we will." He turned to his soldiers. "The human must die." The ambush. Ryan felt every injury. His ribs were bruised, his arms felt like dead weight, and his legs ached with every step. But he had won. As he walked through the warriors' hall, he should have felt victorious. Instead, he felt watched. Sira was beside him, her golden eyes flicking toward the shadows. "Something's wrong," she muttered. Ryan didn't argue. His instincts screamed at him. Then, they attacked. From the darkness, a dozen armored warriors leaped forward, weapons raised. Sira reacted instantly, drawing her blade in a flash of silver. Ryan moved on instinct, dodging just in time as a plasma spear slammed into the wall where he had been standing. "Vektal," Sira snarled as she parried a strike. "Coward." The warlord emerged from the shadows, his armor gleaming under the red light. "I am no coward," he sneered. "I am what the empire should be." Ryan exhaled sharply, positioning himself beside Sira. "Let me guess," he said. "You didn't like the emperor's decision." Vektal's claws flexed. "You do not belong among us." Ryan smirked. "Funny. That's exactly what your champion Kavar said before I beat him." Vektal snarled. "Kill them." The battle erupted. Against the odds. Ryan had no weapon. Sira had her blade, but she was outnumbered 6-1. And Vektal was waiting. Watching. Letting his soldiers wear them down. Ryan dropped low, dodging the first strike, then twisted his body, grabbing the wrist of an attacker and using their momentum to flip them over his shoulder. A second warrior lunged. Sira intercepted, her blade flashing as she cut through armor and flesh. Ryan grabbed a fallen enemy's dagger, spinning it in his hands. A warrior came at him. Ryan sidestepped, slamming the blade into their side. Another. Then another. But the Cellary were relentless. Ryan blocked a strike, but the force of it sent him crashing to the floor. Sira was holding her ground. but even she was struggling. Vectal finally stepped forward. "You fought well, human," he said, raising his weapon. "But in the end, you are still nothing." Ryan gritted his teeth. His body refused to move. This was it. Vectal brought the blade down, and it never landed. A massive hand caught the weapon midair. Vectal's eyes widened. Ryan looked up and grinned. Kavar had arrived. The warlord's judgment. Kavar towered over Vectal, his expression unreadable. "You are a disgrace," Kavar said, his voice like thunder. Vectal ripped his blade free. "You defend this," he growled, motioning to Ryan. Kavar's red eyes burned. "This human stood against me," he said, "and he still stands. That is more than I can say for you." Vectal lunged at Kavar. It was a mistake. With one brutal motion, Kavar grabbed him by the throat and lifted him into the air. Vectal struggled, but there was no escaping the warlord's grip. "You have dishonored the tournament," Kavar growled. Vectal gasped for air. "The Empire must be pure." Kavar tightened his grip. Then he snapped Vectal's neck. The body fell lifeless to the ground. The remaining rebels staggered back in horror. Kavar turned to them. "Leave," he ordered, "or die." They ran. The rebellion was over before it could begin. A new future. Ryan sat in the Emperor's throne chamber, his body wrapped in bandages. The war was over. Sira stood beside him, arms crossed. "You should be dead." Ryan smirked. "That's becoming a habit, isn't it?" She chuckled. The Emperor entered, his piercing gaze locking onto Ryan. "You fought well," he said. Ryan nodded. "Thanks." The Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly. "You have won more than a tournament, human. You have changed our empire." He stepped forward. "Kneel." Ryan blinked. "Wait, what?" Sira nudged him. "Kneel, human." Reluctantly, Ryan lowered himself to one knee. The Emperor unsheathed a ceremonial dagger. "In recognition of your strength," he said, "I grant you the title of honorary Cellary warrior." He placed the dagger on Ryan's shoulder. "Rise, Ryan Carter, defender of Earth, champion of the Cellary Empire." Ryan stood. The warriors in the chamber pounded their fists against their chests, a salute of respect. Kavar grinned. Sira smirked. And Ryan, he simply exhaled. Because against all odds, he had won. Earth was safe. The Cellary Empire had changed, and Ryan Carter was now a legend. To humanity, he was a hero. To the galaxy, he was something more. A warrior.